Well, it's clear Justin Trudeau wants to grab power, wants a majority.
Justin Trudeau has been criticized for calling this election.
Parliament needs an opportunity to get a mandate from Canadians, to hear from Canadians on how to end this pandemic.
Imagine how much this is going to cost us and put us more in debt.
And we just had one 2 years ago.
Why are we having an election?
That's a great question, my fellow Canadian.
You've been sending similar questions to our Ask CBC News inbox. So how much does it actually cost to run an election, and who pays for it? This election is expected to be the most expensive in history, an estimated $610 million for a 36-day campaign. By comparison, the last election cost around $100 million less. So how does Elections Canada account for these totals?
Elections Canada right now has to be able to invite 27 million electors to cast a ballot.
This is a huge mobilization, and especially in a minority government context, that's going to happen at the drop of a hat with very little notice.
Elections Canada doesn't publish full cost breakdowns, but it can be divided into 4 parts. Pre-election planning, then, after it's over, evaluations like surveys, campaign reimbursements, and then there's the bulk of the cost, the actual delivery of the election.
I don't know if as voting citizens or as electors, we realize that there's almost 280,000 people working during an election. That makes Elections Canada the largest employers in the country.
Paying those workers is one of the biggest expenses. Plus, the cost to rent office spaces for returning officers and locations for polling sites in 338 ridings across the country.
McDonald's has 1,500 outlets across the country. Well, Elections Canada, for a very short period, of course, has 20,000.
And of course, there's supplies, things like pencils, signs, computers, phones, and ballots. Add the pandemic, and that hikes the cost even more. I'll come back to that. The cost of running an election has more than doubled over the past 20 years. A good way to assess is per voter. For example, why the significant difference between 2011 and 2015? The campaign period more than doubled in length in 2015, indicating longer elections cost more. That's just one factor that's out of the control of Elections Canada, but there are more. First, the number of people who can vote is always increasing. Then inflation, especially now. The cost of services like Canada Post and Wi-Fi can also go up. Sometimes there are legislative changes, like in 2015 when 30 new ridings were added to the map. And then you have factors like, say, a pandemic.
That will be the peculiarity of this election. Significant costs to ensure that the electors can confidently attend a poll location and mark their ballot without putting their health at risk.
About $52 million has been estimated for pandemic measures like PPE and additional mail-in ballots, though that number is just a projection. Finally, candidates and parties are reimbursed for campaign expenses by Elections Canada as part of financing rules. Some political parties will be eligible for rebates of up to 50% and candidates as much as 60%. In 2019, that accounted for $64 million, about 13% of the election's total cost.
Those countries that choose to provide some sort of financing of political parties are doing it because they believe that, first of all, it's going to help those parties provide that educated and deliberative function that they provide in our system. It's also going to allow an even playing field. So it means that not just super wealthy donors are making these decisions or super wealthy candidates.
Elections Canada doesn't actually have an annual budget, so where does the money for elections come from? Ultimately, taxpayers. The Chief Electoral Officer can draw from the federal fund made up of taxpayer money and other government revenue. He doesn't need pre-approval from Parliament, except in the case of some permanent salaries.
It's very rare, but it's meant to ensure the independence of Elections Canada.
it is an investment in our democracy, and that it is good for us to go through this experience, this deliberative experience, and that, a democracy requires that we have periodic elections.
Do you have a question about the election? Email us at ask@cbc.ca.